Hey, it's Glenn, and this video is going to be all about my short story, Metrognomes Worse Than a Gremlin. And here is the cover art that Molly Breimer did years ago. Oh man, I love this cover art. This story is available primarily as an ebook for the Kindle and related apps. There's also a paperback that you can get through glenslaideclarkjr.com if you are so inclined. And where this story came from was pretty much, I may have talked about this, didn't watch the video on Music of the Metrognomes before I made this, so I don't remember if I talked about it in that video or not, but I had 3 short story ideas in the Metrognomes world that were basically preludes to the novel, to the first novel, and it just came from the fact that Metrognomes was so different from anything I had written before, and I was fairly intimidated by the magnitude of the world and the story and just all of the cultures in it, and I wanted to test it out a little with some short fiction, and I had 3 ideas. 2 of them I wrote. One of them never really came together, but I still think it will at some point. The first one was about the 2 protagonists of the novel and kind of highlighted the cultural differences between the tech gnomes and the old world gnomes. That was Music of the Metrognomes. The second story, which was this one, Worse Than a Gremlin, was all about the old world culture and specifically the warrior class within that culture, because Kaz-Kal-Notal was going to be a very important supporting character in the novel, and it was really, I really wanted to get him right, and I really didn't want to write the novel and not know what I was doing, so this was a great way to get to know the character. And some other supporting characters as well. His apprentice Ansep Notal was in the first novel, and I got to start kind of introducing his jealousy issues. Fraternus and Jono, 2 warriors that are in the novel, make their debut in this short story, and Jono, incidentally, is a big part of the new Metrognomes book that's out, The Demons of the Blood, which is another spin-off kind of a story that's a prelude to the novels. It's actually, I had some more short fiction ideas that were sort of testing things out for the second novel, so that's what The Demons of the Blood is, but I digress. And Miso Notal, his father, is in the novel. His mother, Shiza Notal. Molly, the illustrator, just so you know, hated those names. They reminded her of Jar Jar Binks. I thought they were funny, but and I still think they're funny. I like that they're called Miso Notal and Shiza Notal, and you know, Notal being their clan name is funny to me as well, because they're only like 3 inches tall, about. You know, they're the size of like old school Star Wars action figures, or you know, modern Star Wars action figures, but there's so many different kinds of Star Wars action figures today, so you know, just look pure vintage 1978, and that's how tall these guys are, because that's kind of what I used to imagine when I was a kid, is that these were little people and the world was like so different from their perspective. So it was important to me that that be the size of these gnomes. And Worse Than a Gremlin, I mean, it's not just a prelude to the novel, it's its own story, and it's a good one, I think. I enjoy the morality play of it, where it shows you kind of what sort of a hero Kaz-Kal is, that he's willing to work with gremlins if he finds them to be innocent. That's the whole point of the Notal Battleaxe. And oh, let me talk about the Notal Battleaxe real quick, because, right, it's got this magical property that it can only be lifted by someone who is worthy to lift it. That sounds a whole lot like the Marvel Thor hammer thing. I have to own that. It sounds so much like that. And I am ripping something off, but to let you know, I was not intentionally ripping off Thor. I never read Thor comic books as a child. I was unfamiliar with that whole part of his mythology. Really, who I'm ripping off is King Arthur, and it's not going to become clear until later in the series. But the Kazkal No-Tell, yes, it's ripping off a myth, but it's not Thor. Not on purpose anyway. It's definitely more of an Excalibur sort of thing, and you'll see that. You'll see that as the series progresses over the years. I mean, it's not just a lift thing, and it's not like with Thor, at least in the movies, because I still have never read Thor comics, but in the movie anyway, Thor's like the only person who can lift it. But, you know, with the No-Tell Battleaxe, pretty much anyone who has the same sort of experience combined with goodness of heart that Kazkal has can lift it. Like his grandfather can lift it. His father could lift it. You'll find also as the series progresses there are some other warriors who can lift it, and Sep cannot. And there's a reason for that, and it's frustrating for him. But he's young, he's unseasoned, and he has a pretty jealous and vindictive heart. So, we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, I just wanted to address that because after seeing Marvel movies and looking back at Metrognomes, I feel like it looks like a ripoff. And yeah, it's a ripoff, but not of the hammer whose name I can't pronounce, but of Excalibur. So, you'll see. And, you know, ripoff, I say that flippantly. I would really call it an homage. Metrognomes it's very rooted in archetypal myths. So there you go. I mean, there are going to be a lot of mythological parallels within the story. The Battleaxe is just the first one that was introduced. You see Kazkal pitted against Bindu Saran, who's a warrior from another clan, with a completely different set of ethics. Actually, he doesn't really have ethics. He's selfish. He shows up in the novel too, and you see him at his worst once again. So for the brief period of time he's in the novel, but he's a perfect contrast to Kazkal's heroic nature, where when they team up with a gremlin to defeat the mud troll, Kazkal has no intention of betraying that alliance, while Bindu obviously does. If you've read the story, you know what I'm talking about. You know, I really don't have that much to say about this story. I feel like so much of what needs to be said can be left to the video where I talk about the novel, because these really they're almost like the missing chapters of the novel, like chapter -1 and chapter 0, or actually chapter -2 and chapter -1. I didn't write chapter 0, and that one would have been about the villain from the novel Fenrir, and again a reference to, well, that is a reference to Norse mythology, Fenrir the wolf who ate the world. But you know, again, in Norse mythology outside of Marvel comics, I don't recall seeing anything about the hammer not being liftable, which is why it concerns me, because if that were evident in the ancient myths, I wouldn't be as worried about it looking like a ripoff. Like I'm not worried about it looking like a ripoff of Excalibur, because it's a public domain kind of universally known myth. But right, Fenrir, I'm rambling. I'm talking about a story that doesn't exist. But you know, this was Worse Than a Gremlin was supposed to be the second of 3 stories. It wound up being the second of 2 stories. So anyway, I felt like it was a successful experiment, getting to know these characters for 2 stories, and it really did benefit me when I wrote the novel because I already had been through some stuff with several of the characters. I already knew them. It helped me just get right into the manuscript and go. And Kazkal is one of my favorite characters because he's the sort of hero who things just happen to him, silly things, and he has to endure them. I'm going to get back to this character soon when I write Aradia's Wand, which is the second core series Metrognomes book. That's really all I have to say about Worse Than a Gremlin. If you have questions that you'd like answered about this, I'm sure that I'll do a video sometime in the future just answering questions if I ever get enough. So go ahead and send me those questions. I'll keep them in a file or something, because I know I didn't really speak much to the plot of the story or anything like that, and you might have universe questions about it, I don't know. But that's it for now. Next week I'll have another Between the Lines episode up talking about my short story Breath. So until then, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to y'all next time.